Hi, this is Trev and welcome to my blog. Welcome to another exciting episode of Tips and Tricks. Firstly, thank you very much for all your comments and emails. I've been receiving lots lately. I've had lots of new subscribers, mostly thanks to Dave Jaguar 66 who endlessly plugs my videos on his channel. So thank you very much, Dave. Say hi to Amir and I really do appreciate it. And if you're interested in classic car repair, then go and check out his channel too. I'll stick a link in the video description. So what we got coming up for you in this episode is car body filler work, a very contentious subject. We're also going to talk about roasting tins. Roasting tins? Yes, there's a story I once heard and it directly relates to what I'm going to talk about to you guys about car body filler work and other things, other contentious subjects to do with car body work along the same lines. So the story I once heard is a man was watching his wife prepare a roast meal and she cut the end of the joint of meat off before she put it in a roasting tin. And he said, "I've seen you do this for the last 20 years. Why do you keep cutting the end off?" And she said to him, "Well, I believe it makes the meat cook better." And the guy looked rather confused at his wife and said, "Well, how do you know this?" And she said, "Well, I know this to be a fact because my mum did exactly the same." So the man phones his mother-in-law up and he says to her, "My wife says to me that you used to cut the end off the joint of meat before you put it in the roasting tin." And she says to him, "Well, I do that because my mother used to do that." Well, her mother was still alive, albeit in an old folks home. So they contacted her mother and they asked her exactly the same. They said, "Why do you cut the end of the meat off before you put it in the roasting tin?" And she said, "Well, I do that because my roasting tin's not big enough." Anyway, car body filler work, getting back to that. Now, many times in the past, in the recent past, people have used fiberglass, chicken wire, cornflakes boxes, old newspapers, stuff it up inside a rust hole, and then put some fiberglass over the top, some fiberglass paste, fill over the top of that, then paint the car, and it all looks lovely. And then what happens is, after 6 months, 2 months, 2 years, whatever, all starts bubbling up nicely, and then somebody has it checked out. They've either bought the car like it or something like that, so they have it checked out, and the garage comes on and say, "What a bodge job! This car was full of filler." So, filler in a car means that it's been bodged up. And this is what I'm talking about with roasting tins. So if I ever leave a reply comment to anyone that says roasting tins, then we know exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about misinformation, Chinese whispers. It's all been handed down. We got ourselves into this situation, particularly in the classic car trade, where nobody wants to admit to actually using car body filler, which is probably one of the most widely used things in the world. I mean, the filler industry produces billions and billions of gallons of this stuff and sells it every year. Well, somebody's got to be using it. And what I find quite amusing is you see a lot of places that do restoration work, they show the pictures in metal work, they always skip the bit with the filler in. And believe you me, a lot of these cars have got a skim of filler over them, and people that are doing it properly, they'll weld things up properly, they'll make sure they eradicate the rust, and then they use a thin skim of filler just to smooth everything over, because people want arrow straight body work. They don't want to see it wipply and wavy and all the rest of the things. They want it nice and straight, and they want to see tight gaps, because modern cars are built so much better than they used to be. So everything's straighter, everything's tighter, and this is what people want. And the only way you can turn something that was manufactured 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago and make it look really nice is you have to put a little bit of filler in there. And there's lots of misinformation about filler, and some of the things that people say, endlessly say, is I don't want any filler in my car because obviously it's a bodge. I don't want any filler in my car because it shrinks. So what are the 3 issues we got with filler? Well, we got the 3 issues are the main issues are shrinkage, are sinkage, and is gloss drop. I would have said personally, well, shrinkage. People say that filler endlessly shrinks. Well, it does to a degree, but a lot of these problems are all down to people rushing the job through. Now, if you put filler in something, then it will shrink. You put the filler in, and as it's going off, it's shrinking quite a lot. I intend to do a little experiment on this one day with a digital vernier caliper. We'll measure how much filler shrinks by. I want to do lots of projects like this and strength tests and things, and this is all something I hope to do in the future. So you put filler in a car, and yeah, it does shrink, and I can actually feel the shrinkage myself, and it's all to do with time scales. So if you put filler in a car, so put some filler in a car, do the repair. If you can afford the time, do the repair, do it in 80 grit. So you've roughly got it to the shape you want, and you're happy with it. You know that when you pass it over with a smoother disc, with a smoother grade like 180 grade, you know that it's going to be smooth enough and it's ready to take the primer. So you check your repair, you think that's right. Leave it till the next day. Don't make it smooth now. If you've got the time, I mean, if it's your pride and joy and you've got lots and lots of time to restore it, get your repair right in 80 grit, leave it till the next day, and then nearly all the shrinkage will have taken place by the next day, 24 hours. I mean, you may find that that filler is going to shrink, say, let's just for argument's sake, say it's going to shrink 10% in 24 hours. Oh, that's nowhere near that, but let's just say 10% 24 hours. So after 24 hours, it'll shrink that 10%. And then after that, it's going to shrink like 1% over the next sort of year, you know, and each day it's going to get less and less and less. So you need that window of time to build, to factor into your repairs to get over this issue of shrinkage. So that's the one thing. The other thing is what you're finishing your repairs in. You want to prep your repairs with 180. So before you start putting filler in, make sure everything's nice and smooth with 180. If there's paint that someone else has applied and it's not manufacturer's paint, it could be old cellulose or something like that, perhaps bare metal it before you put the filler work in. So, you know, get rid of it, eradicate all this old paintwork, get rid of it all. Maybe epoxy prime the surface or leave it in bare metal. Make sure it's nicely finished in 180 before you put the filler in. Then when you end up with your repair with 180, you've got a nice smooth surface, so that when you put your primer on, it's got something flat to stick to, and it's not going on something that's really, really coarse, old paintwork and everything else. And what's going to happen if you got this situation where you're painting over old stuff, bits of aerosol, old paint, it's always going to sink. So this is sinkage side of things now, and it's exactly the same. I mean, modern body shops, what they're doing is they're putting filler in something, they're rubbing it out, they're priming it up, they're force drying it, they're painting it, and the whole operation could be done in, say, I mean, I've seen stuff go in for repair, goes into repair, it's painted within 4 hours, and everything's force dried, and it looks immaculate. It goes away, a week later, it's all sank, the gloss has gone out the paint, and the reason it's done this is because nothing's been allowed to cure for long enough. You need that, like I say, you need that window of time. Let things dry, let things shrink, you know, let the solvents dry out of it. And the other thing is gloss drop. And again, gloss drop, most of this can be attributed to, let's get the job done as fast as possible. The filler hasn't had a chance to shrink, you've whacked the primer on, you force dry the primer, you put your paint straight over the top, solvents haven't come out the primer, and then what happens is a lot of the resins and stuff in your top coat will then absorb themselves into the primer, creating a situation where you've got a drop of gloss where the filler is, or where the primer is. And this is all about rushing the job. So, like I say, people see these things and they say, well, it's because the wrong product's been used. Well, no, it's not really about the product, it's about the execution of how these repairs have been carried out. And I thought I'd just fill you in, myth bust a few things as well. I mean, I'm creating, I try and give you as much information as I can. I'm being as honest as I can. I may not get everything absolutely 100% correct, but to my knowledge, I'm giving you the best I can. And you know, let's go forward like this, and I'll try and solve a few of these things, a few of these issues for people. So let's get back to the video. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to show you some of Trev's red hot tips and tricks. I've watched people do things and I thought, oh, that's a good idea, you know, I'll adopt this into my own kind of, you know, work practices. And there's other things I've thought, yeah, offer the trades. I thought, that's brilliant on that. Surely we could cross-reference this into the body trade from the woodworking trade, something like that. So I'm going to show you a few tips and tricks that mainly I used. I've been criticised in the past for using it. What are you doing that like that for? It's going to take you a lot longer. And then they'll come round afterwards and they'll say, good grief, haven't you repaired that well? Well, I've repaired it well because I've adopted a new technique that I've either learnt off somebody else, or there's something that makes common sense to me. And sometimes it seems like you're going around the houses a little bit, but then when you see that fantastic result at the end, it's worth it. You know, you put an extra hour into something and it's twice as good, then yeah, it's worth doing, man. There are very many different guises of car body fillers on the market these days, and it can be quite daunting to know what kind of products you're going to need. And these are fiberglass paste repair products, and these are fillers. And a quick price point here, this can is about a third of the size of this one, so there's 3 times more filler in that can than there is on that, and all these cans are about the same sort of cost. So why the difference in cost? Well, they all have extremely different properties. This is a very short stranded glass fibre repair paste. So glass fibre paste is basically chopped strands of glass mixed with fiberglass resin. And like I say, these have very different properties. This has superb adhesion properties, much better than the one below, but I would use the one below for different applications, say like skimming a large flatter area. I use these for reinforcement repairs. If I've welded a panel in, then it's very good because it can actually help seal the weld, because it's pretty impervious to water because it hasn't got the kind of powdered additives that fillers have. Fillers can absorb water, whereas fiberglass is pretty much just glass and, like I say, resin, and it seals things up quite well. This is why we use this. Also very good for doing small reinforcement repairs. And like I say, these do have completely different properties, so I'd use these for different jobs. These fillers, they have two different types of filler here. So we've got one made by Evercoat, which is a lightweight filler. We've got a U-Pole Dolphin. I've not used this that much, but this is a good all-rounder really, this filler. Nothing wrong with this product whatsoever. But what's the difference in properties? Well, this one's 5,035 grams. This one's 2,564 grams in weight. Both exactly the same volume, which means that this filler is half the weight of this one. Okay, fine, you say, well, just use this product. Well, no, this product isn't very good at finishing things off. So what I would use this for is if I had a very, very large flat area of bodywork that was low and I needed to build it out. I don't want to add significant weight to the repair area, so I will use this first. I'll skim the panel, I'll get the shape more or less correct, leaving it slightly low, just low enough to put a finishing filler over the top. So this is how I'd use these products in different ways. This is a good all-rounder. This is Evercoat Easy Sand. Again, another little price point. Everything here is all sort of pretty much the same price, and we've got 880 mils of filler in this little bottle. We've got 3 litres over here, and we're talking the same price. Now, if you just go in on price alone and you bought this thinking, well, I'm just going to buy that at so much cheaper than that, you've just made a huge mistake. If you're actually wanting to make a finishing your repair off, and you want to make sure that it's absolutely perfect before that primer goes on. So that's why I say they all have vastly different properties from each other. One technique that I've picked up over the years, and I'll explain it after I've explained something else first. Going back to right at the start of the video when I was talking about the fiberglass paste, that's what I've used in there to fill in this recess. Now I'll explain a little bit more about what I'm actually doing here. This is my old vintage van, which is going to be a catering van, and when I made the arches up, because these arches have all been made brand new, there were 3 or 4 pieces. I've manufactured this sill, the inner sill, the quarter panel, and on it goes, because it was just so badly corroded. So what I did is I made the arch to exactly the same pattern. I made a former and I made the arch to exactly the same pattern as it was originally. And then when I came to do my catering conversion, that big side opening door there, as you can see, I soon realised that the sliding door wasn't going to be needed anymore, and I got to hinge the door. So I've hinged the door from the rear. See, I've made these hinge mounting points, reinforced from behind, and I needed to make a door shut, because this was a sliding door of course before, and the door used to slide forward and go into this recess. There was a rubber seal in the recess, and then the door would slide in there. Now the door opens and shuts, it needs to shut against a seal. Well, the problem I had was, because I copied the exact original pattern, because I made this piece as well. I mean, this is all just completely missing around here. So this section originally came down, and the line ended in that corner, in there, level with this inner tub here. And of course I had nothing to mount a seal to compress a seal in the door shut. So what I've done is, I mean, I primed it, I've epoxied it inside, it's all sealed up. The last thing I want to do is start cutting it about and welding more panel work in. So what I've done is I've just got a piece of steel shaped to that profile, and there's the top of it there. You can just see a bit of metal sticking out, and you can just see the lower edge sticking out on the sill side. And what this has meant is I've actually built up, so I've epoxy glued that steel to the arch, and then the issue I had then was had this steel sticking up in the air inside the van, and I thought, I know exactly what's going to happen. Somebody's going to kick this piece of steel as they get out the van, they're going to catch their foot on it, and it's going to break the glue across the back. Apart from the fact it didn't look original, it didn't look right, I thought, well, what I'd do is I glued it on, and then this is fiberglass under here. So this just shows you how creative you can get with this stuff. So this is fiberglass paste underneath, which has just been shaped to make it look like the panel work comes out naturally. So that's something that I've just built into the van, because this wouldn't be here originally. This would just smooth into nothing. So what am I going to do next? Well, the technique that I was going to explain before I went off on my usual tangent is the technique, the filler technique that I want to show you is this razor sharp line along here is supposed to be extremely curved. You can see the bodywork's nice and curved here, and it comes round, it follows down, and it's supposed to be curved all the way down to the bottom of this panel. And what I've done is I've left it razor sharp for now. There's a very, very good reason behind this. Any lines that you're going to put in your filler work, get them as sharp as you possibly can. Now, the whole purpose of this is, if your flatter surfaces, if there's any deviation at all to where this flat surface is supposed to be, then it will show up in your line. This line won't be straight. Now if you rub your filler out so that you keep these lines razor sharp right up until the end, it helps you maintain the levelness of the filler. I think you get what I'm saying. This is razor sharp as well, and this is fairly sharp anyway. I'll just take the edge of this off, but that there needs to be very, very much rounded off, and I've left this right to the end. This filler work is finished now, and I just need to radius that off. I'll do that and then I'll show you the end result. But like I say, keeping this razor sharp means that the panel work is lovely and true, and it's a good guide to tell you that the panel work's correct. The arch is back to the correct profile now, rounded off nicely. Just got a couple of minor little pinholes that I just need to put a bit of filler in, but I can do that when I'm filling the outer arch, because the next job will be to put the door back on. This arch will need a very light skim of filler just to get it exactly the same profile as the door. If you're interested in looking at anything more to do with the van, then I'm working on a 20-part blog. I'm up to part 19 now. Lots of technical detail within those blogs. Some of them run to an hour long, so might be interesting for some people to watch. Something I made myself up a few years ago was this little gadget. I got the idea from a mortise gauge, a woodworking tool for marking out wood, and it was something I was kind of working on in my head for quite a while, and then I come up with this little contraption. It's adjustable, so you just loosen that off, that slides up and down, and it's used for marking out filler work. I actually made it specifically for doing wheel arches, flared wheel arches that have got like a little lip, and then the arch comes in, it's all stuffed in, and you need to work out where the lip goes. And I could use this, just hook that under the arch, and then the pencil would draw an exact line, exactly spaced, so that it was in the correct place. So I'm going to use it on this now, because the arch it looks like it's varying in thickness slightly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hook it over the top part of the arch, because I've got the gap right to the door. Happy with that gap, so I can then hook this in the gap and measure down, scribe a line all the way around, and have an absolutely perfect line. You won't see this anywhere else, folks. Looking at the arch with my eyes, it looks to me as though the arch is slightly wider here. Certainly in this area. I've put the wing on, and I know that the gap from there to there is correct with the wing, and this seems to be narrower than here. So I'm going to set my gauge to this part of the arch and then scribe my line down. Need to try and keep this as level with the arch as possible, so I've got to keep it turning as I go down to keep it parallel. All the way to the bottom, and hopefully the camera will stay in focus. Okay, so we're at the top of the arch there. Follow it all the way down. You should be able to see the pencil line indicating where I need to rub my filler off to, so that there is pretty pretty substantial. Like I say, I could actually see it with my eyes anyway. So I'm going to, hopefully there'll be enough filler in there. There may not quite be enough filler, but I'm going to rub the filler off now, back to this line. These arches are extremely curved anyway. If you look at the edge of the door, you can see there's no sharp edges there at all. It's quite a nice soft edge on that door, and the arch is the same. So once I've reduced the thickness back to that line and then softened my edges, that's going to look really, really nice. And there we go. I brought our filler edge up to the pencil line, and immediately I can see by eye that things look a lot more refined. It just didn't look quite right before to me. And it's quite nice as well, because just as I approach the pencil line, I broke through the filler. You can just see my epoxy undercoat under the arch. Maybe a little bit of steel as well, just broke through the steel. So it's nice to also see that it's not whacked full of filler. It's just a very light coat over the whole thing, just to even things up, which is nice to think that it's just a nice steel panel that looks like it fits superbly well. Now I've just got some damage in the bottom of this door, so I won't finish this arch off completely till I've repaired the front edge of this door. It's all a little bit cat and mouse game really, when you've got such a lot of work to do. Every single panel on the vehicle was horrifically damaged or corroded away to nothing. So that's what you get for buying a 60-year-old ex-builder's van, I suppose. Anyway, this has turned out well. Very happy with this. Lovely gap now. It's always the gaps that give you away. If you can get your filler work straight, your gap's perfect, and then a really, really nice coat of paint on it, it really, really shows that you've done a decent restoration. If nobody notices it's been repaired, you've done well. This door, just give you a basic overview. It was a sliding door. I've changed it to a hinged door, which means that I mean, the door was very badly damaged anyway, but by converting it, it means that I've had to cut a lip off all the way around here and re-weld it, which hasn't helped with the shape of the door. The door was very, very badly damaged at the lower end. Also, there was a rail under here that the rollers went into, which I've cut off. Also mounted this hinge. There's a lot of strengthening on the inside, but I've had to bend the door slightly so the hinges both go through the same axis, which hasn't helped either, which means I've got quite a low spot round this hinge area, which I'm going to reinforce with some fiberglass. I've got my base layer of filler in, and I've ended up putting a little bit more filler in than I'd hoped. This is because of this low point in the hinge area that I discussed earlier. And the upshot is I've ended up with a situation where this step has ended up being a lot deeper in this area, which I think looks quite ugly. So what I've had to do is put my thinking hat on and work out a way I can disguise this. I don't want to just reduce the height of the filler here, because my lines are going to be all wrong on the front face, and they're pretty perfect now, so that when you look at the van door head on, all the light's going to be hitting the paint surface in straight lines. It's going to look lovely and flat. I've achieved this by building the back edge of the door up, but like I said, the step's too high now. What I can do, I've worked out, is I've got this strengthener that I've welded in, because this is a sliding door and it's now hinged, and I've managed to put strength into the door by welding this solid bar in all the way along here, which joins the two hinges together, makes a nice strong joint, and the strengthener ends at the hinge there. So what I can do is, I thought what I could do is build this step up on the top. So get the camera back in focus. This step here, I'm going to build this up, which will make this part, this stepped part of the door appear to be narrower, and this will look fatter than it should look. But what I can do is, where the strengthening is on the inside, I can build the lip up down to the strengthening on this side, which will make it look level. I'll do this, and then I'll come back, I'll show you what it looks like afterwards. The other thing as well, this is leant back slightly. If you look, you can see it's leant back slightly. So I can also build this out with filler, bring this round. Because this is leant back, it's a longer distance from there to there, because it's leant back. When it's more upright, that'll also look shallower as well. So all this can be taken into account. A little bit here, a little bit there, and it'll look pretty good, I think. I built this edge up so that it's probably more upright than it would have been originally, but it means that it's reduced the height as well, the perception of the height. And then this lip underneath, rather than building it out on the other side, I've just tapped this lip up very slightly, only probably a millimetre or two, and because I've tapped that up and then filled the lip level again, it gives it the illusion of the step being a lot shallower. I'm perfectly happy with that now. I'll go completely unnoticed, and which was the whole point of the exercise. Repairing this huge panel, this quarter panel's been made up of several sections that I've fabricated myself and welded in. As you can imagine, huge big flat panels, lots of heat distortion. I've also fabricated and welded in inner wheel boxes, and couple of different fuel flaps in there that shouldn't be there, hole in there for a water tank, etc, etc. So it's needed quite a lot of filler, as in not huge depths of filler, but I've basically filled it from one end to the other to make sure that all the filler runs flush and it's not picking up any edges. Try and get it nice and flat. So a top tip here, it would be worth watching this. If you can grasp this, it would be worth watching the whole video if you can actually get your head around what I'm explaining here, because this is something that a lot of people have overlooked that have been doing the job for many years. So what I do is, if I've got a big flat panel, so this section here is essentially dead flat, slight curve that way, and practically flat in this direction. So this is a very large flat panel, and it runs into an exceptionally curved panel. So what I do is I break it all up. The reason I break it up is, if I mask a line along here, I can then make sure that the filler is level from the bottom of the quarter panel all the way up to where the curve starts. So the curve has just started up here. It just starts to bank off going into this tight radius. So if I mask a line there going the other way, and I fill up to this, fill up to it, rub it down, fill up to it, get it as flat as possible, and I've got a nice hard line. I know there isn't a line there originally, but there is now. So I've got a nice hard line. Now the reason you get this hard line is so that when you look down the van, you've got a nice flat panel going all the way up to this line that ends in exactly the right place. Lots of people doing these kinds of jobs, you'll be able to look down the panel afterwards and it'll look wavy all the way down. Curved sections will just drop off in the middle and come back up again. You have all these sorts of issues going on, but if you mask straight lines into the panel work, then you can fill up to the line, get the filler work absolutely right up to this line, then remask it again. So I've got the flat area, I've remasked it again to get the curved section. So what I'll do with my super flexible spreaders is I'll put more filler in using the curved spreader coming this way, and I'll fill up to there. Of course what I'll be left with is a hard line. I want the hard line. The reason I want the hard line is because if I leave this hard line in, I know like I was going back to again, I'll explain it again because it's hard to get your head round. But I know that the panel is flat from here all the way up to an exact place, and I know the curved section is straight going that way, all up to an exact place. I can then get the filler dead right up to here, get the filler dead right down to there, and then right at the end I rub off with me sanding block, of course, I rub off that hard edge and blend the curved section into the flat section, still using masking tape again so I don't go down too far each side. I can mask off a strip where the edge is, so I'll mask 2 strips, and then I'll sand between the 2 strips of masking tape, and I'll sand it all the way along, getting rid of that hard edge so that this fantastically accurate piece of filler blends in nicely with this flat panel. So the filler's been skimmed round. That was really hard to do. To skim that from that length of that van all the way around that corner as well, without stopping. I've done quite well really. Got a few little bits that just need cutting off with a razor blade, but nothing too major. So what I do now is just mask it. Filler's still soft, not wet, but certainly not dry, so get the masking tape off at this stage. So there we go, it's unmasked now. We've got this beautiful, accurate, crisp section all the way down the van. In raw filler at this stage it needs rubbing down, but that's what I'm going to do next. So I'll rub this down next, and we've got quite a hard line here. It's actually overlapping at the moment, but I can sand that off. So that'll be the next job, will be to sand that line. Sand it from there to there. Just stop there, don't go any further. So we end up with a nice kind of false swage line all the way around there. Okay, so the top section has been sanded down all the way to the line, ensuring that I've kept the line straight. Of course, the purpose of keeping the line straight is to ensure that the profile of both the top curved section and the flat section remains true. Because if we ended up with a wobbly line here, it would also mean that our top or our bottom would be leaning in or out, and that's why you get a wobbly line. So keeping that line straight ensures that all the profiles are true as well. So the next step that I'll do, as you can see, I've got a bit of a line here. It's like a bit of a false swage line. Of course, if you were wanting to put a swage line like that in, then you would mask it off exactly the same, and you would leave the line in. You would just basically leave it dead sharp, because what I always do is I leave everything as sharp as possible right to the end, all the way around this flap. What I'll do, I'll get that dead sharp around the arch. I'll get that razor sharp so you could almost cut your finger on it. And then what I do then is right at the end I get a bit of 180 grit paper and I just blunt it off to the correct profile afterwards. Like I said, ensuring that all your lines are kept sharp means that all your panels are flat around the lines. So the next thing I'll do is I'll probably tape off about there and there, so I've got a band that I can stick to, and I'll now shape this to a nice rounded profile all the way along back to how it originally was. I can use this end as a good guide, because you can see I'm just starting to go through to my epoxy coating underneath, and I've also gone back to the steel almost there. Just, you can't quite see it, but I did earlier. I put a tiny little skim of filler over that, so I can use this as a good guide. Sand over here, keep going, keep going, keep going until I start breaking through here, and then I know I'm pretty close then. So that'll be the next stage. Okay, all finished. I've blended the curved section into the flat section, and I'm as happy as I can be with it. The only way I could try and improve things is by skimming it over again. and I estimate that if I skimmed it over again, a real thin skim of filler, shaped the whole panel again, I reckon it would take me another 8 hours on top of God only knows what I've spent on it. So I'm not going to go down that path. Yeah, I've just measured this panel. It's 2.5 meters long. What I'm going to do is spray some panel wipe down the side and check to see how good the reflection is. That's pretty good. Okay, so thanks very much for watching. Nearly out of time. Just want to go over a few points. So let's reiterate, go over and fill in a few of the blanks that I may have missed out. So let's start from the start. We've got our panel work done, okay? So you got your panel work done. First thing to do when you got your panel work done, make sure everything's as flat as it possibly can be, because obviously the smallest amount of filler or primer or paint product you can use to finish your job off is going to save you masses of money, masses of time and effort, and nobody really wants a lot of stuff, a lot of product in their vehicle to make it look nice. So everything as flat as possible. The best way, if you're looking to do the best way, you want to get all the old paint off. So this is why they say bare metal respray. So get all the old paint off, finish in 180. Can go like 180, 240, something like that, finish like that, your bare steel. You can epoxy primer stuff, so you can epoxy prime the bare steel, which gives you a better base, I believe. Fillers and fiberglass pastes and things like that will stick far better to a coat of epoxy than they will the bare steel, but obviously you can apply filler directly to bare steel. So prep with 180 before you apply filler. Like I say, your filler, you can put a thin skim over the whole car. It really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, because what you're looking to do is you're looking to get the best result you can. And where you're going to get edges on your filler is where it stops and it blends in with the metalwork. And this is where you're going to get a deviation, you know. Your filler's going to run out, it's going to go into the metalwork. If they haven't feathered in exactly right, then you're going to see a line there, or a ripple or a wobble or something right there. So, like I say, it doesn't matter thin skim over anything. It doesn't really matter how much you use. Just bear in mind the curing times and the sinkage times and everything else, like I was saying right at the start. And then finish everything off in 180. You don't really need to go much smoother than 180 when we're talking about filler work. You can go 240. The problem is, when you start going too smooth with things, you're losing the cutting power of your abrasives. Because your abrasives, the coarser they are, the more they cut and the straighter things will get. And you'll find that as you go something smoother, so you'll be going smoother, then things will start going ripply again, and it's because you're losing your cutting. You know, it's not a straight cut anymore. So what you need to do really is shape something with something reasonably coarse, and then finish off with something smooth, just to finish off, just so you've eradicated all those harsh, deep scratches. So do that, and like I say, you've got any old paintwork on there. So you've got old paintwork, it could be all sorts of rubbish on classic cars, oil-based paint, old cellulose, bits of primer and everything else could be all in there, and then you're filling over the top. You're not flattening it back nicely, and you've seen it a million times. You've got people putting filler in stuff and then it's over the top of old paint, and then around the edge where the feathering line is, you've got all these hard scratches. So the scratch will consist of old paint, filler in between, old paint, filler in between. So you've got all these lines going off at the end. Well, of course, that filler you've only just applied. You've just applied that filler to old paintwork that could be 20 or 30 years old, that's completely dried out, and you've got filler in between. That filler is shrinking because it's a fresh product. You spray over the top, and then you wonder why a month later you can see all these little lines under the surface. And this is why, you see, it's all about preparation. So when you've finished your filler work and you're going to put your primer on, put your first coat of primer on, put it on light and let it dry off for a bit, because if you really ladle primer on top of filler work, the solvents out of the primer can then go into the filler, and then when you actually paint over the top of the primer, you can end up with an issue called solvent popping, where you've got like lots of little blisters all just where the primer was. Again, it's not a fault of the filler or the primer, it's a problem with application. Sometimes you can get products that don't agree with each other, but that's another issue altogether. So if you like I say, if you're primering out, what I intend to do on the job I'm doing at the moment is I'm going to give everything a very light coat of epoxy, and then I'm going to leave it at least till the next day, and then I'm just going to give it a very light key with a Scotch-Brite pad, and then I'm going to give it 3 good coats of primer, knowing that it's sealed off. And the other thing you need to bear in mind is you try and use a product that's going to seal off a whole area. So like the epoxy works quite well, the epoxy primer works quite well with the filler. They're the same kind of hardness, and the epoxy will be fully dried out anyway in 7 days, so you can put your filler over the top and then put your primer on, but put enough on to try and seal it up. And then if you've got the time, why not leave the primer a month to dry out, so it's completely dried out, and then all the fillers done all its shrinking and moving underneath. So all the fillers dried out completely, the primer's completely dried out. Then you can rub your primer down with a 240. So start off with a 240 strip, quite coarse for rubbing down primer on a block, 240 it down, then go over with a 320 DA pad, maybe end up with a 500. If you're doing a solid colour, you're going to have to wet and dry it if you're doing a metallic paint. And of course what people do is they say products work best over themselves. So I mean, some of the real, top people that are doing the real nice high-end, £100,000 restorations and these real mega expensive custom cars you see in the States, they use the same product over the products that are like prime something twice. So you'll rub it down, then you'll put another layer of primer on, then you'll paint it and then lacquer it several times. You've heard of people saying 15 coats of lacquer, because what they're basically doing is they're putting the same product over the same product. It's not fighting with itself because there's no difference there, so you get a better, glossier finish at the end. The other thing I'll just go over as well, all to do with filler and primer and everything else, we're going back again to people saying that filler's no good and it's a bodge and all the rest of it. I mean, all these products are quite similar, really. And a lot of restoration companies, a lot of the high-end restoration companies, use products called like Reface. A Reface is essentially a sprayable filler. This is all about getting things as flat and as nice looking before the paint goes on. Do your bodywork before the paint goes on, not after. So they'll use a Reface, which is basically like a sprayable filler. It's kind of like a fiberglass resin mixed with bulking agents, styrenes and things like that. Like a very runny filler, but it can actually go through spray gun. So they'll spray, a few coats of that on, get a really nice flat finish. Again, it's all uniform and it's coated the whole vehicle, so there's nothing to break through, into another product behind. And then they'll give that a good blocking down, and then they'll primer over the top of that. And all these things, it's all aimed at making something that looks visually brilliant when it's finished. And that's what it's all about, really. It's all about making something look as nice as you possibly can, after you've done the bodywork as well as you can. Okay, well I'm out of time. I'll say goodbye. The next few videos I've got coming up are, the next couple of videos are going to be product reviews on different fillers. Thought we'd keep to the same theme for now. So 2 more videos, product reviews on fillers. Then I'm going to do a Q&A video. So all you guys that have been asking me all these questions for the last couple of months, I'm going to try and roll them into a Q&A. I'll probably do several of these over the next sort of year or whatever. So all the questions you've been asking me, it's going to be a lot to do with welding. So it's going to be a lot about how you can adjust a MIG welder to get a different desired effect. You know, you're blowing holes. How can you turn the welder down? You know, not necessarily just by turning the power down on the welder. There's lots of different ways, and I'll show you how to do that. And then after that, I'm going to get on to what people really want to know all about, which is about metal fabrication, panel fabrication, and I'm hoping to show you a few videos of, you know, how we make panels at the restoration shop. So people that have got a bead roller and, you know, a few basic tools like a shrinker stretcher, bead roller and things like that. I'll show you how you can make your own repair sections, which I know a lot of you guys, that's what all you really want to know about, is that sort of thing. And the other thing I'll show you as well is how you can make panels not using tools, how you can make panels up using handmade bits and pieces. I've made tools that, you know, have made fairly basic panels and fairly complex panels, and I'll show you how to do those as well. Hopefully you'll pick up a bit on that, so there's plenty to come. So thanks very much. Bye for now.